Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, when you think about the environment we're in right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of sales professionals being laid off. The tech we used to have, we don't have as much of it. Some of it's not being renewed. But what we're finding is the way in which the tech was introduced a few years ago perhaps wasn't the best way. And so now that it's gone, we're relying on skills that unfortunately for some are not there. And so I had the pleasure of speaking with the author of this amazing book, The Sales Innovation Paradox, Dr. Dover, and he is also a professor at UT Dallas Professional Selling Program. And I actually had the pleasure of joining one of his classes when they were doing the P&L activity, which was great for me because when I, went through university, there was no sales program. So the fact that they're getting such fantastic training that prepares them and it's a really smooth transition to the workforce makes sales intentional. So people aren't joining it and after the fact or a fallback job. They're actually seeking out to, get a role in sales, which I think is fantastic. So we talked about, technology, what companies are doing well with technology, how we can use it to augment our team, but not replace them. And we also talked about the importance of agility from a sales leader standpoint, like how quickly can we react to things, and companies that are doing really well, that's what they had in their favors. They were agile. So highly recommend you take a listen, and also recommend you purchase his book if you haven't already done so. It's a great read. And if you listen to the end of the podcast, he's actually got a little value add. So he's asked you to do something in exchange. There's a potential gift. That's all I'm going to give out. So enjoy the podcast. Let us know what you thought. If there's anything that he suggested you do and you've done it, would love to know the results that you yielded as a result of that. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. So I want to welcome Dr. Dover, professor at UT Dallas, to the podcast, and also the author of The Sales Innovation Paradox. For anyone who has not purchased it yet, I would highly recommend. So Dr. Dover, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
My pleasure. Well, I had the pleasure of being at UT Dallas and actually spending a little bit of time with your class. When I grew up, there was sales was a dirty word. It kind of still is, but there definitely was no university program. So we've come a long way, and it was so insightful to see what they're learning and that natural transition to the actual selling word. So it's great what you're doing, and I imagine you're helping hundreds of people, thousands of people a year.
Well, thanks. That was a fun moment to have all of you women in business sales leaders just come in. And that's when we do our win-loss huddles anyway. So
Yeah.
it was right during your break, and you could come in and give them context and perspective and coaching right when they were trying to visit with their peers about their successes and their failures. So
It was great because I didn't really have a point of reference in terms of like how much in-depth information would they have, how familiar they are, but they knew their stuff well. They knew probabilities, and they were very open to feedback and coaching. But it was just great to see that young people are going into these programs, because what it shows me is there's intention. Most people, sales is you end up in sales like I did, and it's like when you can you're intentionally there. It's so different because you know your why, you know your purpose. You've designed this to happen, and I think it's a different outcome and a different experience you're able to provide as a result of that.
yeah, I think we were talking a little bit in a pre-record here that sales has a problem in that most of the field falls into the profession, um, and not not intentionally, a vast majority fall into it out of exhaustion, actually, right? Oh no, my student loans are due in the US and I don't have a job. Well, here's a recruiter who's hiring just about anybody to breathe on a phone. I guess I'll do that. So my mom and dad don't, repossess my car, whatever the case may be, or I lose my apartment. So, sometimes that's the real moment. Lots of people I know that do keynoting and are famous people talk about how they fell into sales or what their motivation was, and it was usually they were broke. And yeah, so this is actually a group of people who say, "Wow, there is a profession here, and if I spend a little bit of time, I invest a little bit of time, about 3 to 5 courses. Some programs have majors. We don't. We have a certificate, and I'm intentional about it. Then maybe I can develop a lifetime learning capacity to be a professional in the space."
Mhm. I love that. That's the difference, I think, just what you said there, that lifetime learning. Because I think about one thing that came to mind is there is the culture. And when companies are trying to hire uh, a new sales team or new sales force, like that continuous learning, that constant trying to evolve, get better, improve, like you've already honed that skill or that you've attracted that type of person. So they're going to then follow companies that continue that pursuit of always wanting to better themselves. That's what makes top performers.
Well, during the pandemic, I interviewed 4 of our alumni that were just punching it out of the park. And what started this was a young lady who was in the program. She sent me this little text, and it was early in the pandemic. And she said, "Hey, just thought I'd share with you my performance." And so it was this little Salesforce report that showed her closing the previous quarter, and then it showed everybody else on the team. So here, this little teeny, on a scale, the 100 was the rest of her team, which was 10 people, and she was at sitting way off here over at 1,000. She was 10x
Mm. Oh
of
my
her team.
gosh.
And she said, "What's really interesting is," she goes, "everybody on the team is 5 to 10 years of experience, and I'm just 6 months out of school."
Mhm.
And I said, "Can I run with this? Can I post this online?" And she goes, "No, you'll get me fired. Oh no, please don't." She's like, "Oh no." And they said, "Okay, no, I won't do that." I said, "But can I interview you? Can I
Mm.
ask you in an interview setting and tape the interview and find out what's driving that performance?" And we found out that there were several other top performers during the pandemic in other companies. There were 3 women and 2 men that I interviewed, and here's one of the common themes that came out, and I think you'll recognize this from the book, because it was early before I wrote the book that I talked to them about probing and adjusting. When you're doing prospecting, you have to probe into the market, see what's working, and then adjust. And every one of them said, "I constantly adjust my strategy. I don't do the same thing today that I was doing 3 months, 6 months ago, because the customer is shifting."
Mhm.
And I didn't prompt them. Every one of them came up with that. And I
Mhm.
said, "That's fascinating because I didn't explicitly teach that in the course. Now it's in the book, but I talked to them about the fact that when we collectively, as a sales world, start creating a best practice, we signal to the buyers that our intent is to be a seller. And if we are good at what we do, it doesn't matter. But the challenge is that so many people are subpar at what they do. So then this becomes a signal to the buyer, especially in outreach and to a degree, discovery, right? Um, then the buyer goes, "Oh no, I'm not going to get what I want. I'm going to get my time wasted. I'm going to be processed through a sales process through a funnel, through, right, whatever the salesperson's methodology is. I'm about ready to be processed like a piece of meat through a
Mhm.
grinder.
Mhm.
And so the buyer creates defensive mechanisms. So I had been teaching that for 6, 7 years. And this group was one of the early stages where we talked about probing and adjusting. Well, they've just magnified that when they got out to the field and said, well, I better not keep doing the same thing because everybody's doing that. So
Mhm.
I have to constantly be adjusting my approach so that I'm relevant to the customer and I don't sound like everybody else. And I'm
And
not talking about being provocative. I'm talking
mhm.
about being relevant, right?
Mhm. But kudos to them for I'm sure you embedded that message in some form that, you have to be iterative. You have to be I mean, if you're gonna do the same thing and expect different results, we all know, it's insanity, but they you must have said something and then they drew that upon themselves. But I think when you think about sales, like I don't like to say it as a numbers game, but it is. And if something's not working, like you gotta tweak it, you gotta modify and see it's troubleshooting what is working, and then when you land on it, the biggest thing is why is this working, because it's timed, it's going to work for a period of time. And so I think what you said is just being closer to the customer and really looking at the behavior. And I don't know how much sales folks are able to slow down and really their level of self-awareness to go, what did I do, me Karen, and I do on that call that elicited this emotion, that did this, what did I say? And so when it's that prescriptive, you can repeat it. But sometimes we're just going through the motions and we're shooting off this scripts and you're like, I got it. I don't know how, but I did it.
So I'm gonna challenge your thinking a little bit because I think that's one of our flaws is that we see something that works and we try to replicate it. And this is definitely organizationally flawed because we use manufacturing principles in sales and yet we're not inanimate objects. We're actually physical human beings with thought processes and psychological change. And so actually you can do everything right and lose the deal and you can do everything wrong and win. This is Joel Laban wrote a great HBR piece on this with luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it effort, you got to have effort, but sometimes you're lucky
Oh, yeah.
and you think you're good because you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
You are good because you actually showed up. So there is something to be said around activity driven results. But when we try to replicate, that's when we often get into trouble because we take something that's working. Classic example is there's a very mature business. Um, I'm going to tell the story, not tell the company name. And this young lady began to modify her motions. She started deploying technology, but she has some unique um, personality traits around charisma and skill around social. She just had a knack for the way in which you would attract people on Instagram and doing so professionally. That was a skill that was not necessarily transferable. And then also her unique charisma wasn't transferable. So the company seeing this massive performance, she is so much a disruptor because the classic concept of this particular company is smile and dial. It's smile and dial. It's like 3 hours a day. We dial, we dial, we dial. And here she is. She's like, I don't have time to dial. I got so much inbound. I can't afford to dial. I have to respond in time, in this time frame. By the time that time block comes, I can't do it. So actually she's breaking the whole go-to-market strategy for this mature business. They don't know what to do with her. So what do you think they try to do is they try to replicate her. Well, that was disastrous
Mm-hmm.
because they took the technology that she was using and then deployed it across a bunch of people. They all did poorly. So now you kind of come full circle and say, well, okay, we tried to take what she was doing, deploy it, it didn't work. Therefore, now all of a sudden she's evil, instead of innovative. Um, and it's just I love watching this because she's such a disruptor, right? She disrupts the pattern because she doesn't follow the manufacturing principles of the best practice of the business. She's broken the code, but she's broken it for her.
Mm-hmm.
It parts of what she's doing is replicatable, but huge chunks of it are not replicatable. And this is where we run into trouble as leadership, right? Is we see something. It's like when you grab a whale, you're a smaller business and you get a whale in your account and you say, oh my gosh, we should go after whales from now on. I got the one big customer that's like 80% of my revenue. I've never had one of those before. Therefore, we must be now an enterprise based company. Well, no, you're not. You got lucky with
Yeah.
one whale that found you valuable. So don't destroy your go to market strategy because right, this happens to us in sales. We kind of get thrown off because we want to scale what works. And that's why when you saw that win loss huddle,
Mhm.
that win loss huddle comes from my friend Eli Cohen, who wrote the book Saleshood. And that was one of the most valuable takeaways from that book was he said, the reason you do win loss huddles is because you could do everything wrong and win, and you could do everything right and lose.
Mhm.
So you have to celebrate the loss
Yep.
as much as you celebrate the win so that people don't get the false perception that you did everything right when you win. Now, sometimes you do, and sometimes there's elements to that. But a lot of times you're just in the right place in the right
Yep.
time with the right ideal customer profile, and bing, they want to buy.
Mhm.
Is it you or is it luck? This
Mhm.
is back to Joel Bond's luck. Now, systematizing it really comes down to saying, how do I become relevant in the moment? And that actually takes some strategic thinking.
Mhm. I love that win loss, but even just before we go there, for me, sales is art and science, right? Left and right brain, and I definitely think you need both. And hearing that example when she tried to replicate the charisma, like that's because charisma, the way she displays it, and the way I display it, and the way Nancy displays it, is going to be different, right? And so that's where you could say those soft skills may not translate. Whereas the hard skills, the process, the structure, those things for the most part we're going to follow. Those are the housing. And then how can we insert our human self? And I think when you try to give someone a script or make them use language that's not congruent and doesn't feel right, that's when things fall flat. Whereas the other girl, it's congruent to her. This is who she is. So I get what you're saying. And there's certain things that are going to, I'm not saying they're not teachable, but they're going to resonate. They're going to land with people the better. And that's why I think it's important to know like where, like align your skill set with the role you're trying to get. So is it a BDR, like that real hustle, or do you like an AE, or do you like customer experience where you really want to understand, you want to get the language? So I think that one, once you know who you are, what lights you up, what your strengths are, then align that to a role within sales that's going to take you where you need to go.
I agree. I think we'll see if all those roles maintain their future given the VC
Yeah.
meltdown. But so I have lots of questions about that. But given the what we know about the past, yes, I think it's also, by the way, um, I think also realizing that you can lots of different customers buy differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's okay that you're maybe not one style or another style. It's really trying to, I think the fundamental thing we try to instill in our students is um, if you would like to help solve the problems of the world every day, you should be in sales. And if you have that fundamental desire, then you can say, I'm passionate about talking to people who have the problem. I'm passionate about helping them understand the problem. I'm passionate
Mm-hmm.
about helping them find the solution to the problem. And I'm also passionate about the fact that they're probably going to have to make some internal changes organizationally if I'm in a large format sale, and change isn't easy, but it's worth it because it solves the problem. If I can think that way and that motivates me, then
Mm-hmm.
I can use my personality and make sure that I'm activating the relevancy within your personality and your structure and your role, and I can be potent. And we have tools. We have tools now that really
Mm-hmm.
augment the salesperson in phenomenal ways that allow this to be done at a much more efficient and effective means. Unfortunately, lots of people deploy the tools improperly.
And so just on that, let's build off that. So the tools to augment them. And I think in the past what's happened is those tools almost replaced them. And now that the technology's gone, where we're finding ourselves is these reps are either out of a job or they're unsure of how to actually get the job done based on their own skill sets because they probably were thrown tech right when they landed in the job and they were never taught the fundamentals of selling, how to imagine just I'm thinking about even my sister's an engineer and they would use CAD. But before that, they had to learn how to actually do the design, the drawings themselves. And so it's kind of like sales. It's like we can't just throw everything into the CAD. We also have to know how to do the calculations and the manual drawings in the event that the system goes down. Well, folks, the system's down and we're kind of we're up the creek without a paddle.
As I think about that, I think it depends on what it is we're turning it on for. I think the challenge has become that really in the sales field, listen, if you're generating proper revenue for your role, for the most part, you're probably in a good place, right? I mean, if not where you're currently at, you can go create opportunity if you know how to generate revenue and pipeline. But I think where the challenge becomes is we kind of raised a generation, I'm willing to call it a generation of salespeople who leaned on tools in such a way that the bots either did the work or they acted like the bot. So they either was a bot doing the work or they acted like the bot doing the work. And unfortunately, you're kind of replaceable and you're unskilled under those
Hmm.
conditions. And so I'm not saying every
Yeah.
technology, but certain technologies kind of lean into that. This concept of cadence. Why do we do cadence? We teach about cadence, but I teach about it very definitively. I don't believe in the 15 touch points I mean, Gardner put something out at the beginning of this year that said it took 66 touch points to get an appointment. I love that statistic. And I'm like, oh, yes, that is the worst statistic. And I love it because
Mm.
it sounds so horrible because everybody will now create 66 touch point cadences. What is the purpose of a cadence? Well, some people would say it's to deliver a
Hmm.
message. I would like to say the purpose of a cadence, first and foremost, is to determine where is your customer willing to accept the message and then deliver the message contextually and relevantly. That's the challenge. But if we continue to hound the customer in a place where they don't have preference, then we're wasting time and effort. I mean, as you get into the book, I talk about
Hmm.
this. What if we knew those preferences? What if we could identify these things earlier? And so we actually eliminate the cadence components in the areas where the customer has no preference. There are certain tools we can actually determine this. LinkedIn's a great example. If you ever look at the amount of people who are actually active on LinkedIn, including salespeople, this is the mind blowing thing. You go into LinkedIn, if you're trying to target salespeople, you would think they'd have a high degree of activity on LinkedIn. But go out and search it. And if you have Navigator, you can do this search pretty easy. Just go find the people who actively did anything. It's they posted or they were active in some way on LinkedIn in the last, I think it's 90 days or 30 days. It's less than 10. It's less than
30
10%.
days.
So what does that tell me? By the way, I
Yeah.
can filter off that. And now
Yeah.
I might be able to deliver the message through LinkedIn because you actually go on there. The other 90%, why would you keep pounding me on LinkedIn? You're not
Yeah.
there. So you must be a phone
Mhm.
or you're,
Mhm.
your Twitter or you're something else. There's some other way that you communicate. LinkedIn's not it. Right. And we keep on, in the phone area, you talk about connect
Mhm.
and sell, it's the picker uppers. There's a certain percentage of people that pick up their phone. The rest of
Mhm.
us don't. You can call me forever and a day. I'm never going to pick it up because I'm not a picker upper,
Mhm.
but the picker uppers will pick up. So you call them, right? So these are the things we know. I mean, these are things where
Yeah.
sometimes we're just using relevant data to augment the capacity of the salesperson. That's just being specific in the outreach funnel and just being more both efficient and effective. Let's use technology to contact these people. Let's use technology to touch the right people in the right spaces. That's huge. When you do it, it jacks up your your success rates.
Well, I think the whole meet them where they're at starts with the mode of communication, right? You can be chasing them, and if they're, like you said, done a search and they're not on LinkedIn, well, why do you why do you keep sending them an email? You're knocking, but nobody's home.
Because I have credits. I have credits there, and I have credits.
Those two will run out one day and you'll be forced to pick up the phone. But this is what I always say, like and sometimes we don't know that. So you just take a multi-channel approach and it's feedback. It's like, what one are you engaging? You can even start, there's some assumptions there. Folks in this industry, in this segment, typically like this. And it gives you that starting point. So you're not starting, blank, but then you can validate and tweak as you go.
Well, then you have this idea that so in full disclosure, I'm on the advisory board of XIQ, so obviously I'm biased on this. But I'll also say that Crystal knows, and some other companies do this. IBM Watson has a personality profile that's been around for much longer than these other technologies. But this idea that we could, before I ever met you, I could use a personality profiler to get a feel for what your disc is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I could be accurate, I could be inaccurate. You may not like disc, but let's just leave that there for a second and say, let's say you're a D and I should be brief and to the point. Let's say you're an I shouldn't be brief and to the point. I should give you as much information as possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're an S and C, I may have different strategies. So once again, this is using technology to augment my capacity to communicate with you in a way that would resonate with you. So that's another element, right? Of just saying, if I'm in a meeting with you and I have three different people in that meeting, this has happened to me so many times where I, I think about one specific instance. I was in a meeting, it was supposed to be a closing meeting. And we had been working on this for 6 months. And all of a sudden, there's three new people on the bus, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the client side. And one of them is making the conversation go sideways. Now, if you're using Miller Hyman and degree of influence, doesn't seem to have the title that makes sense that they could go ahead and shoot this completely. And there was a moment where my student colleague said, "Hey, Dr. Dover, I sent you a briefing on the transcript of the last meeting. You may want to look at it in your email to give you some context." I said, "Thank you," which gave me permission to look at my phone. I didn't look at that. I went right to XIQ and figured out what the profile was of the
Mm.
person I was talking to. Now, bad on me, I hadn't done it before. Bad on my team, we didn't collectively prepare for that because it was a blocker.
Mm.
The personality style was a blocker. And so if you take the challenger customer and you map it to personality profiles, you can actually identify that certain personality profiles have a high probability of being blockers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was in the midst of a blocker. And once I realized that, then I went to their LinkedIn profile and realized they were with a company that actually had quit working with us about 5 years ago. And they were from the HR team. The leadership team liked us, the HR team didn't. And so I went, okay, strike one, strike two. This is a dead deal.
Yeah.
And so I finally just pivoted right then and there and said, hey, as you know, when you worked over at blank company,
Yeah.
we're not always a great fit. And then she took the knives out and said, you're right.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not a good fit. And she, all of a sudden, the deal just went, pow. And by the way, now you might say, well, Dr. Dover, you didn't win that one. That was never winnable.
Mm-hmm.
But we closed it lost as fast as we could once we realized the intelligence we needed in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Once we realized that we had a blocker who didn't want to do business, had a view that was going to be contrary to what we were working on. But this is a concept of using modern technology to augment the moment so that I save time and I'm relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Once I realized what I was dealing with, that they had brought her in, she was going to have some degree of control and she was a blocker. I think it was within 10 days, they gave us an email that killed the deal.
Yeah.
We killed the deal right after the phone call.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And it sounds like you did a bit of Mr. Todd Capone there and led with some transparency.
Yes, well, I think once you realize that you're not where you need to be, it's
It's the only way to
yeah. I mean,
go.
it is the only way. Well, I value my time and their time.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there are plenty of people who I really do need to talk to.
Yeah.
And if you're really good at sales and you really have a solution, you shouldn't be spending time with people who either can't find, or as Matt Dixon's put out, is that they're not capable organizationally of making a decision.
Mhm.
If that's the case, then judge that you probably shouldn't be continuing.
Mhm.
Move on. It's a powerful concept.
And yeah, I always say, if you're gonna lose, lose quick and move on. But just to that, because you're wasting again. Time is the currency we trade. But and I spoke about this today, but that 56% of deals are lost due to indecision. And think about what you just said about if we assess our audience and know who we're dealing with up front to really get in front of that, like the jolt, like judge the level of indecision. So if we can start looking and saying, well, that's a block or that's this, our conversation, even if we start the deal, is going to be evaluated based on who they are, but our approach is probably going to be different because we know who we're dealing with now. We know what's important to them versus you're going in with blindfolds almost.
Well, what's really incredible is that when Matt and Ted put out the book, The Jolt Effect, what they didn't know is that generative AI was being launched, so that we now have tools in the AI space that it's predictive. It's not accurate. It's right. So you have to think about the predictive validity, and it's as valuable as the data that's coming in. But we can now predict the probability of decision with tools, with AI tools, and so we're either there or we're within, I think, a month or two of being able to sort companies by their capacity to make change.
Hmm.
So now think
Interesting.
about this, right? I mean, this is kind of just shaping a completely different world to say, okay, ICP, yes, and maybe even buying intent signals, but really
Mm-hmm.
what we want to know is, are you even able to buy? If we're talking about complex sales, we're talking about larger, complex deals.
Mm-hmm.
This is not in the transactional space, although in the transactional space, this could be useful as well. But definitely when we get a team and the team can't quite make things happen, we can actually look at that. Now, we've been playing with this because it just got released this semester. We've been playing with this a little bit in the classroom and saying, let's look at the heat map of the organizational structure and what's the likelihood they're willing to make a move. Do they have a lot of D's and I's, or do they have a lot of blockers? And if they're built with a lot of blockers, then it doesn't really matter if they're giving us buying signals. That's going to probably be a very tough client to work with. This changes once again. This is coming around to both efficiency and effectiveness, right? When we use technology just to make us more efficient, you're right, eventually somebody's going to shut it off because it's eventually going to lose its efficacy. But when we bring the human being into the augmentation of, how do I just use my time better? How am I more relevant, contextual in that moment? Then I'm so counter to what everybody else is doing. This is coming back to the book and the cycles, right? That customers adopt technology, companies adopt technology, sellers adopt both technology and methodologies and best practices. But if I'm really focused about how the buyer is thinking and what the buyer needs and whether the buyer can make a decision, I can
Mm-hmm.
probably break through all the noise
Mm-hmm.
because I'm going to just talk to you in a way that almost nobody really does.
Mm-hmm.
Quick example, I had a major telecom call us up and say, we want to do business with you. And I said, what do you need? And they said, we need hundreds of salespeople. And I said, interesting. I'm not your guy. And they said, what? And I said, I'm not your guy. I said, given what I know, I don't produce hundreds of elite salespeople. I produce maybe about 50 to 60 a year. I train a lot, but if you're asking for my elite, I only produce 50 or 60. Here are three other programs that produce hundreds, if not thousands. I can't vouch for
Mm-hmm.
their quality, but I can vouch for their quantity. Here are the other places. And they're like, so you don't want to do business with them? I said, well, I don't think I'm the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. And So we ended the conversation, and 3 months later, they call me back up and they say, "Hey, we want to do business with you now." And I said, "Did we miss the first conversation that I'm a bad fit?" And they said, "Yes. But what we realized is you're the only one that told us that.
Yeah.
And we need to train our salespeople better." That ended up being about, I think it ended at about a $750,000 deal with our executive
Mhm.
education group to train their salespeople.
That goes so that de-risking and that just we're not everybody to everything. I've talked about this on almost every podcast, but so many people can't detach from the outcome. And it's just like, sure, I can do that. Sure, I can do that. And what I found is, and even in my own business, when I say we're not a good fit or that's not in my wheelhouse, it will come back to me, whether they readjust their scope and then they want me or they refer something. But it's crazy how many people are just trying to be everything to everybody.
Well, this comes back to how we bring people into the field, right? I mean, if you think about the poor door-to-door salespeople who, or the call centers that don't have a lot of training, it's, by the way, I'll show you how to do this for like 2 hours and then you go, or I show you how to do this for 2 weeks and then you go. Um, so that kind of creates this. It's usually in the transactional realm, so people develop these habits and motions and skills that are related to urgency and, right, creating psychological concepts of getting someone to close, and so we carry that over. And what, those people who are really good at door to door sales, whether it's B2B or B2C, or they're really good at SMB work and it's all transactional, well, where do they go? Well, they're now experienced and they qualify for the mid-market jobs, right? And then where do they go? Well, then they're really good, so they qualify. So that's how we feed the field right now. I call it the survival of the fittest model. We take the survival of the fittest
Mhm.
who didn't get trained. They're the ones who are 80 to 90% of the market we can hire. And so that's why we perpetuate this. Yet it's so potent to do it professionally.
And you got to think there's a resiliency there as well with the survival of the fittest, right? You're sticking around. That's Darwinism at its finest.
A little Lord of the Fliesy, just
Oh.
twisting it to the ugly side of the space is to think, yeah, eating human flesh to dominate your peers and survive is a culture that also can happen. Or you could have a collaborative environment that's amazing to work at.
Yeah. Collaborate. We could take this in another direction as well. One thing I really liked when you said that when you were using the technology and you shot a heat map and you could kind of see the different types of personalities. Imagine your team or your students now go to a company that doesn't have this tech, this AI, but they have the critical thinking skills now. They have the awareness of, I think it's even more important that they're coming in through a lens of what should we be looking for, where everyone else is like, just give me the answer. And it's like, hang on, let's take a step back. And that diagnostic assessment for me, that is so powerful because they're looking at the whole picture versus just, I have a puzzle piece. Where does it go? And so I just think, even if they don't have that technology, the fact that they've had that training and that awareness from big picture and zoom in what to look for is like a huge differentiator.
And that's where, once again, I think to your listeners and even to the leaders out there, we really need to differentiate technology into two buckets. The technology that has the capacity to replace us or a function, and that is what it is. It's a technological advancement that does things more efficient than a human can do,
Hmm.
more efficient, and sometimes more process control. Then there's the pieces of technology that would augment a trained person or an untrained person. And the challenge with that is, and the opportunity with that is, if we give it to an untrained person, they actually create collateral damage. If we give it to a trained person, they have exponential performance differentials.
Hmm.
So let me give you an example on that. Um, you give somebody an Iron Man suit, and if they really don't understand that they could shoot missiles by thinking about it, there's a problem, right? you know, It's you gotta train them. You can't just put you can't just put anybody into that suit. And so you got to think through that. The other thing is that once we get into a suit, one of the challenges we face in early technology deployment is that we use technology to enhance what we currently do, not necessarily to create new motions that the technology allows. Let me give you an example. Coming back to the Iron Man suit, you know, I, I run, I jump. You put me in an Ironman suit, I can run faster and I
Mm-hmm.
can jump higher.
Mm-hmm.
But what I should be doing is flying.
Mm.
So the technology enables me. So let's say I have a point to get to that is 3 miles away. You put me in an Ironman suit and I say, yay, I can run there really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still required to make movement with my feet. It's still going to take me a really long time. I get up in the air, I remove the friction.
Mm-hmm.
I can fly there so much faster than you could run, even if you can run bionically. I get there faster. I have time to think. I'm not moving my feet like Can you imagine my poor legs after running like really really fast? I don't know. The mental, the physical drain on the body for doing the old motion with new technology. But this is exactly what we're doing for the most part. Let me revise the statement. It's what 90% of the market is doing that's experiencing the sales innovation paradox. They're deploying technology, they're getting faster, and they're exhausting their people. And yet there are these few people, about 10% of the market or less, that are saying, yes, but maybe there's new motions. And maybe we should teach people how to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And when we teach them how to fly, they no longer have to jump, they no longer have to run per se. They can fly and they can get the job done not only better and faster, but also less stress and anxiety on their mind and their body. And but this takes new thinking. And by the way, this is where it's challenging, right? That survival of the fittest problem that we have is most of our leadership didn't have it. Therefore, they don't know how to deploy it. They don't know how to train on it. So this becomes not something I embrace, it becomes something that threatens me.
Mm-hmm. And
My very existence is threatened by the innovation.
And I see that a lot. But when you were sharing that example about, the person running and jumping and unaware, or they haven't had that out of box thinking of, wow, I can fly. Is that up to the individual to realize that, or is that up to the leader to say, hey, this is what this suit can do? Like, where is the role clarity there?
I think I would say it doesn't matter. Whoever creates it. But what does matter is, does the organization have agility to
Mm-hmm.
allow
Yeah.
support when it happens? So for example, if I'm in a strict compliance framework
Mm-hmm.
where I have 100% compliance to a methodology, a sales stack, and a cadence process, and right, whatever the case may be, I develop, and we're everything is measured by the KPIs. We're very manufacturing driven, and then all of a sudden somebody deviates from the principle but gets huge results. Are we capable of saying, well, let's allow that, let's study it,
Mm-hmm.
let's determine, is it an anomaly or is it something we could train on? Once again, realizing the danger could be that it's very personalized anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
So are we allowing for deviation? And so yeah, I think it's individuals can discover. And a lot of people ask me, well, what are the new motions? And the best answer I can give you is, I think we're all discovering them.
Mm-hmm.
We're in, I mean, what are the new motions with generative AI? Don't you think we're in a process of discovery? I
Totally.
couldn't tell you,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll see it when we notice
Yeah.
it. We'll go, oh, wow.
But it,
Because when we see somebody fly, we go, oh, we could fly.
I want wings.
Oh,
He got there really fast and he's not out of breath. And I have a ripped cape that's not getting me far. Yeah. And you know what? I just think it's that willingness to, like, I'm in that same thing now. Like, my first newsletter went out today and it was 60% written by Chat GPT to show, like, to try it myself, but also show people that it's not there to replace us. Some people it will replace, but leverage it, modify it, but use it as a starting point for those meaningful, meaningless tasks that, like you said, technology is going to replace us or replace a function. Well, we don't want to be replaced, but is there part of our jobs or our roles that we can put that on to the AI and allow us to show up with a humanized, meaningful addition to it?
Yes. And that's the opportunity and challenge for each salesperson who wants to stay in the field and be able to achieve their goals and their dreams. And it's the opportunity and challenge by leadership to say, how do I develop a organizational structure that supports, allows, if not has this agile concept
Hmm.
and is relevant, right? That uses a jobs to be done framework based off the buyer's perspective, what they're trying to do, meet the
Hmm.
buyer in the moment, not be processing people through a manufacturer principle, methodology driven, tech stack enabled, KPI measured
Oh, that sounds like
machine.
prison.
It is prison. And that's what the customers feel. That's why they avoid
Yeah.
it.
But think about the sales rep like showing up to work and they should be happy and like, yeah, I'm coming to work today. That's like a pure robot and there's no insertion of your personality. It's all data. It's like where's the creativity? Where's you? You hired me as a person. There's no um cell here for me to insert any metrics on my personality.
Well, this is I saw a presentation about what Microsoft did in Dublin at the AISP Leadership Summit. And I had a friend at Microsoft and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be over in England. Can I just drop into Dublin and talk to the people?" And he set it up, gave me half a day with the site lead, and the site lead did a really good job of letting me talk to a lot of the people who were executing. The last thing I did in the day was I visited with several of the salespeople. This was interesting because it was fully teched, full blown recommender system. It was probably on the early stages of the AI that we're currently seeing in ChatGPT. It was an augmented system that did a lot of the behind the scenes work. When I talked to the salespeople, I said, "What is it like to work here?" And one of the ladies said, "I don't ever want to leave." But this She goes, I've always worked for sales bosses who tell me, hey, I got to hit my number. Hey, I got to hit my number. Hey, I got to hit my number. I've never had a leadership team that is so invested in making me
Better.
accomplish my objectives more efficiently, more effectively every day I come in. They're
Mm,
helping me get better so that I can do my job,
mhm,
which is help the customer, not do all this other stuff that I used to have to do at my old job
mhm.
that a computer can clearly get done.
Yeah.
And they said, I'll never work anywhere else.
Well, you know what that reminds me? There's 7 types of waste, and one of the waste is human capital. And so think about that woman there. She's showing up and she's like 35% of people actually sell. Or 35% of our time is actually in sales. We're doing all this admin silly stuff that why did you hire? So I love that they're supporting that and when they see the value and what it's doing for her and allowing her to do what she's meant to do, but then, you mirror that onto the prospect. That's what they're looking for. Like they want humanized, meaningful conversations where people are genuinely interested in helping them make a decision and navigating this buying journey because it's new to them. And so when you can remove all the noise and the fog around them, they can actually do that. And I would say a lot of salespeople are capable, but they're underneath all this crap that they don't need to be doing. And so maybe it's like the sales leaders need to go, hang on a minute. Maybe I'm, from the dinosaur age, but maybe I'm going to, take a little bit of a shot of agility here and start saying, this is uncomfortable for me, but what it's going to do for my team and in turn the prospects, I'm willing to go into a vulnerable place.
Yeah, I think leaders really need to take some stock about where they stand right now. And
Hmm.
I think it's a combination of saying, do I have the right technology? Do I have the right leadership? Do I have the right go-to-market strategy? Do I have the right training? Um, and where are my opportunities? Where are my weaknesses? And I've been asked by a few Fortune 50 companies to come in and analyze that and try to identify the opportunity points. And given the things I've written in the Paradox book, and the fact that we've worked with so many companies over the last few years. That's what that's what brought the book. Is I came to Dallas 10 years ago, and Dallas was experiencing this really transformational moment about 2 to 3 years into my time here, where because of the tax-based system in the United States, Texas had a tax advantage over a lot of other states. So we had relocations of massive amounts of headcount for sales that occurred over about a 3 year period of time. And so I got to watch the building up of multiple 300, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 headcount organizations out of nothing. And, some of them were relocating, some of them were standing up. And I started to recognize trends to say,
Mm,
hmm, here's some people who really did everything they were asked to do and then they were fired because it didn't work. Here's some
mhm,
people that, um, you know, once again went into an org and they overstaffed and then all of a sudden it didn't work. And then there were these few that did it so strategically they became some of our best partners. They're still our partners today. After 10 years,
mhm,
they still work with us. By the way, there's only a couple of them. And they continue to be at the point of agility, the point of
mhm,
technology innovation, and they teach us and we teach them. We collaboratively
mm,
learn the best way to go to market.
mhm. That's so good. I think that's the word of the century. Just after the pandemic, and even as the pandemic started, like those who shifted, and it's reactive, but it was survive or die, right? And so I think whether you are agile or not, you became agile.
I don't know what it's like in Canada, but this huge march up in our interest rates in the US plus the
Oh, we're quadruple what you are, I think.
yeah, it's so that dried up the VC money because now
Mhm,
now money has somewhere else to go since interest rates aren't zero. And then at the same time, ChatGPT came along. We're
mhm,
we're almost in a perfect storm right now where
mhm,
transformational change. I mean, it's almost like Groundhog Day. We woke up in the pandemic. You remember 2019, how we all made our
mhm.
annual plans, and then in 2020 we went. The whole world shut
Yep.
down somewhere around January to March. The whole world was shut down, and
Uh-huh.
then of course by 2021, in 2020 we were making plans for 2021, and it's like every year we keep on making plans. Well, this year it's the VC meltdown, the potential bank failures that are going to continue to occur,
Yes.
ChatGPT, interest rates going high, massive layoffs. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's like we've had four now poor sales leaders and executive leadership. They've had 4 years of just this is a really bad movie.
Mhm.
It's just
This is a Freddy Krueger movie.
this I don't know what 2024 is going to bring, but I don't have a lot of optimism. It's just getting kicked out of me. But this is the sad thing that we're in. But you're right. The only way to face it is Phoenix has come out of ashes, right?
Mm, well, we're just changing the 1 to a 2, the 2 to a 3, and hopefully the 3 to a 4 on the date.
And yet people are winning phenomenally if they've done it right.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing. There's still, I don't want people listening to this to go doom and gloom. There's still a lot of people that are successful. I'm all about the this too shall pass. And so, I feel, and I've always felt this, that we have to equip ourselves. Even if we weren't going through this, we still have to upskill. We have to be relevant. We have to, the talk I did today, I talked about the valuation problem that Matt Dixon said that people don't know you're the green or you're the blue logo. They can't make a decision because there's no differentiation. So how can you just really, know your audience? Like it's the bar is so low to be different, but yet people aren't taking advantage of it. And so what would you say, Dr. Dover, just as we're wrapping up here, if you would say, like, what are three things that sales professionals can be doing right now to really stay in the game, but more than that, want to win versus not lose?
I I think the first thing is to realize that buyers have jobs they have to get done. I love the jobs to be done framework by Gartner. And um, this jobs to be done from the buyer's perspective, if you could be relevant to understanding the jobs they have to get done to be able to buy your product, your service, to make that change, you're going to be an invaluable resource to that
Mhm.
client. Um, the other thing I think I would say is, um, if you can be the solution, the pain is still existing in the world, problems still exist in the world, innovation is constant. So we are going to need salespeople forever,
Mhm.
because people are going to be stuck in some of the challenges they face in making change. That's what salespeople are there to do, is to facilitate the buying process and the
Mhm.
jobs to be done so that change can happen. If you can become a person who understands this and then use technology to enhance your capacity, you will be an exponential performer. You will not just, you won't be 50% higher. You could be as high as 8 to 10 times higher.
Mhm.
And that sounds ridiculously astronomical, but not really, because when you do this, you're so relevant to the buyer, because the
Mhm.
buyer is sitting, all of the Gartner research for years has been saying buyers want a rep free experience. Really? Do they want a rep free experience, or do they want a rep experience that actually is useful?
It's
That's
a
what they
valuable
want.
rep. Yeah.
They want a valuable rep experience. The
Yeah.
same research actually says that the buyers are hungry for a seller that can help them buy.
Mhm.
So if you can be the person to help them buy,
Mhm.
you're going to win.
Mhm.
So you have to be a pattern interrupter. You have to be a disruptor of the status quo. You can't run to the technology and be the people that are going, wow, I got an Ironman suit, I can run faster.
Mhm.
You need to be the people that say, I got an Ironman suit so I can fly.
Mhm.
That means I could actually think through what my client needs when I arrive. I'm relevant to the moment they land, they're in, their personalities, they're in, their potential to make a decision.
Mhm.
That is the differentiator, Karen, is if
Yeah.
I'm a good salesperson that actually is relevant to my buyer, that I can be the differentiator.
Mhm. And one word I use here is the OPP, the other person's perspective. And those three areas just sum that up for me in that, before you get on that call, like, are you looking at things through your buyer's lens, their perspective? What 3 to 5 questions will they have? What objections will they have? What's their level of indecision? All these things before you get on the call. Because the minute you get on the call and you voice those, you lead with that, and they haven't opened their mouth, all of a sudden they feel heard, they feel validated, and they feel like they're in good, capable hands, that they start disarming, they start telling you what's actually going on. And they say, well, you really get me. And the next natural thought is, you must be able to help me then. But people come at it from, and it's logic, right? And then it's like, well, what do you do? And then that's your invitation to share your value prop, because they actually are curious what you do because you've made it about them. But so many people are still in that seller motion, that they're pitching and we do this, we do that. They don't care. At this point, they don't care, and no one's acknowledged that there's a problem. So I still think that those three things you just suggested is all about focusing on the other person.
It is. And what's amazing is what people find, what we've found from as we watch our alumni get out in the field and work this way, is that not only do they have higher win rates, um, but they have bigger deal sizes
Mm-hmm.
too, because the client isn't being sold.
Yeah, you're helping
The
them get the right
client is
person.
opening up to the opportunity of what they need to
Mm-hmm.
have, which then becomes a bigger deal than what you thought it was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And for me, this isn't even sales. This is just being a good person. Like, really. Like, I'm just saying, I would treat I would look at my husband, my kids, my friends first and go like, what would make this really special for them? It's just human nature to really consider your audience. And it's not like, oh, in sales I do this and then in real life I'm I'm selfish. I genuinely want to help people. If I can make their day better as a result of speaking with me or dealing with me, and they don't buy, that's still a win.
I, and more importantly, and I think you would agree, right? If they don't buy, but then they value me, and then You know this. You said it. You said
Yeah,
it to me. All of a sudden,
they're
two
coming back.
months go by, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you have a referral coming out of nowhere that says, "Hey, so and
Mhm.
so said
Mhm.
you were the person to talk to about this."
Mhm.
Because you actually did qualify the customer and say, I'm not even going to push you to sell because we're
Mhm.
just not the right fit. But
Yeah.
let's stay professional, and if there's any time I can help you in the future, there's
Mhm.
respect.
Totally. Or your problem's not at a point right now that we can help you. Like if it's a drip, wait till there's a bucket that's full because it's not a good use of your time or your dollars. Like that goes a long way because it just shows you weren't out for the sale. You genuinely, and that's a good test. Like if I were a customer, I'd set you up to see if you took the bait or not. And if you didn't, I'm like, okay, you actually have integrity. I'll call you in 2 months when when the bleeding's protrudes. Well, what a great conversation. Before I invite you to share where people can get in touch with you, because if they don't know you, then they have been living under a rock. But I would highly encourage you to get the Sales Innovation Paradox if you haven't already gotten it. And Dr. Dover, let them know where they can find you and where they can purchase the book.
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. That's the best way to connect me. You can do follow or connect, and you can go to UT Dallas as well and find me there. That email is ugly because I get spammed by everybody operating on a cadence from every conference I've ever attended. Um, so I'm a sufferer of my own paradox, and then, uh, yeah, and let's put something fun out there as to kind of promote your podcast and the book simultaneously. Let's say that the first person who tags me and mentions this comment, mentions the podcast, mentions the book, and says, "Dr. Dover, remember you said I would send you a signed copy." Then I will send that person a signed copy, the first one I see out on LinkedIn. So,
Love it. And what about an Iron Man suit? Would you send one of those too?
yeah,
Teach them how to fly.
there you go. We'd have to call Marvel and see what we could do.
We can arrange that with our selling and negotiation skills. Well, that's wonderful. Let's see who takes you up on your offer. That's a great offer. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for sharing your insights and your wisdom as always. You are definitely helping elevate the profession of sales from, the generation, all generations. So thank you for everything you do for the sales community. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.